One of the joys of Active Minds is occasionally we get to touch history. We have a program that we do on great stories and history of the game of baseball. And one time an instructor was giving this program, and towards the end, he noticed there was a woman kind of in the front who seemed to have something she wanted to share. And with a little encouragement, she shared that when she was a young woman in Baltimore, she was a waitress in a restaurant, and one day in the back of the restaurant, the other waitresses stopped her and they said, "Do you know who you're waiting on?" And she didn't, and they told her it was Babe Ruth. And as she told the story, she smiled and she said, "And he tipped 2 dimes and a nickel." Sometimes at Active Minds, we get to see seniors grow right in front of our eyes. Ruth was an attendee at a poetry program we ran at a retirement community for many years, and she loved the program, but she would always criticize poems that didn't rhyme, and she would say that it's not really poetry unless it has a distinct rhythm and a rhyme to it, and she kind of was known in the group as the one that would not accept free verse as true poetry. Until one day the group was focusing on the poem The Layers by Stanley Kunitz. And in the poem, Kunitz describes his life. He wrote the poem in his 70s, and he describes living his life and losing friends along the way, and at the end, living in the different layers and continuing to change and grow. And at the end of the poem, one of the attendees turned to Ruth and said, "Well, what did you think?" And this poem was not written in a rhyming meter, and everyone kind of expected her usual response, but Ruth said it was beautiful. I loved it. And there was almost this audible gasp in the room, and one of the other attendees turned to Ruth and said, "Ruth, I think you just grew a new layer." Sometimes at Active Minds, we really get to see the impact of what we do in a pretty profound way. There was an attendee, her name was Betty, at a retirement community where we did a long-standing program, and as Betty got older and her health started failing, her attendance at the program got somewhat more erratic, and her daughter told us later that she started slipping in and out of a coma, and she would, when she was more lucid and awake out of the coma, she would ask about the Active Minds program and wanted to make sure that she could attend that. She had the opportunity before she died to write her own eulogy and script her own funeral, and in her eulogy, she mentioned the Active Minds program as being a highlight of her latter years, and in her funeral invited one of the Active Minds instructor who taught that class to say a few words at her funeral, which he did.